This is Advisor 3.0, a show designed to help you as a financial advisor elevate your professional practice, transform your clients' lives, and take your business to the next level. I am Abraham Okusanya. Welcome to the show. For over 2 decades, my guest today has been a passionate advocate and supporter of financial planning profession in the UK. And to my mind, very, very few people have made such an indelible mark and seen the profession evolve. I'm talking about none other than the, shall we say, outgoing Vice President and Head of UK and Ireland Advisor Group at Dimensional, David Jones. David, welcome again to the show.
Thank you very much, Abraham. It's great to be here.
So this will be your your third time on the pod, I think.
Exciting. Yeah, you've been very kind to invite me on a number of occasions, so thank you very much for that.
You've and I meant that, and I said that at the CISI conference a couple of weeks ago when I, once again listened to your presentation. You've made a mark on the profession, and you've watched the financial planning profession evolve over the last couple of decades. Sum up that evolution, the current state of financial planning profession, looking back over the last 20 years or so.
Okay, so not a small question. How long have you got? I think clearly a lot of people would have noticed how much it has changed from a transactional financial advisor world to this much more holistic idea of you treat the whole person, you do financial planning for people in a very different way. And so if I think back to maybe the early 2000s, and I started going out to the US to do coaching programs out there, and they were talking about having financial planning software. And when you sit down with a client and you do the plan, and this was sort of alien to me. I was like, financial planning software, the plan, because really what we did at the time was, if you had a problem, well, don't worry, we've got a policy for that. The insurance industry manufactured solutions, didn't they? If you were going to die young, well, we could sell you life insurance, or if you live too long, we could sell you an annuity. And so, we could solve all your problems with a product, and it's just a question of let's sell you one. And I think probably the biggest change has been that very dramatic shift away from we're just going to solve every problem with a product to let's be planning led. Let's actually sit down and think through what do people actually need. And I think what really impresses me, and when I go to, for example, the CISI conference now or Next Gen or PlanX conference, just how much passion and enthusiasm there is for financial planning amongst the younger planners, and how very different it feels now to the sort of conferences that I would go to maybe 20, 30 years ago, where it was all about, here's some change that's happening in tax legislation, and here's how it means you can just go out and sell
more
products.
Yeah.
And that really has shifted quite a bit.
Good stuff. So at the recent CIS conference, I might be shut down for this, but I had this uneasy sense that the hardcore financial planning movement has somewhat plateaued. The number of CFPs has remained around the 1,000 over the last decade. The number of accredited financial planning firms is in the low hundreds. Do you think that financial planning has taken off in the way that you imagined that you would, say, 10 years ago?
Well, that's a really good question, because without doubt, the need for financial planning has never been greater.
Yeah.
And if you look at depending on whose stats you look at, let's say somewhere between 6 and 8% of the UK population have some form of plan or some access to financial planning or even a financial professional, then surely that must mean that the opportunity is huge. And so I think what I have observed is in the recent years, the financial planning as a profession, which always was like a way distant third or fourth compared to the, accountancy or law, etc., and finding that younger people looking at the profession and say, actually, this is really interesting. This is something worth investing my life in and my career into, because it different from maybe the accountancy or law, that I think of it as a future-based profession. And there is no other way that you can work with people. Like, you're planning their futures and you're dealing with their hopes and their dreams and their wishes, etc. There's no other business that you get to do that in the way that you do with financial planning. And I recently wrote an article called "The Time Traveler's Financial Planner."
I saw that, yeah.
And it's really this idea that when somebody comes in and sits down with you, you're actually dealing with people, not their past. So you've got not just maybe the products that they've accumulated over their financial lifetime, but you've also got all of their attitudes and opinions and their inherited attitudes and opinions around money and things that will have impacted how they deal with their financial life. And then you've got everything that that is potential for them into the future, maybe 20 or 30 years hence, or maybe closer than that. And you're dealing with them at this moment in the present. So essentially you've got the past and the future competing for space in the present. And that is kind of exciting, isn't it? So when you say, well, for the future of the profession is actually, I think it's getting that message out to people that this is a fantastic way to spend your career, because you get to work with people and deal with the things that are really, really important to them. And I think that's why a lot of the younger planners that I come across are so excited about it. And it fills me with great optimism for the future. I think the key for the profession and the professional bodies is how do you translate that into people willing to do the work. I mean, the question is, you see it plateauing in terms of the firms and the people willing to go through the CFP, et cetera. And I just think that we need to keep encouraging the professions to keep promoting that, and for people to go, yeah, this is a worthwhile thing for me to do. And I sense that maybe the plateau is kind of, it's taking a bit of a breather, and before we go into the next phase, maybe. And then probably we'll get into talking about AI and impacts in different ways. But I think some of the interesting ways that it changes the profession, because it's sort of, as I spoke at the CISI conference, it sort of changes what the work is, or what potentially it can be, that if we're not having to deal with the sort of the drudgery aspects of financial planning, which I think people go, oh, it takes you so long to pull all the information together, so long to write plans, and we're really interested in dealing with the people, that if it does the heavy lifting in some respects, then the exciting parts come to the fore. And whether that means for the profession and the exams, etc., is maybe that has to kind of move in lockstep with the times. So it's not just about how do you accumulate knowledge and then get to regurgitate it in an exam format or etc. But for the future, if we're going to be interfacing with these different technologies and AI, etc., it really requires that you have judgment, because you can't just accept that whatever the AI has produced is going to be infallible. And so you have to have this real sense of judgment. Well, that only comes from knowledge and experience. So it doesn't get you off the hook in terms of your training. And so I'd like to think that maybe as the exams and the CFP profession moves forward, it does so in a way that it's helping people expand not just their knowledge, but also their judgment around what are they looking at. And I think those case studies, which everybody talks about, how notoriously difficult some of those case studies are in the CFP, but that's the great thing about the doing those exams, is because you are actually developing those skills that you need in the real world, where you're faced with difficult and complex situations to resolve.
Yeah, I'm tempted to go into this direction that you've opened, which is it'll be interesting to see. I mean, in the US, the AI, I think it's ChatGPT, might have one of them has passed the CFP exams, and in the UK, you're starting to see ADA. Even ChatGPT will pass this sort of the diploma. I don't know if we're prepared for a world. It would be interesting, to see whether, with CFP being, part of it, being based on case studies, someone might use AI to actually write this, write this thing, rather than actually sitting down to do the thinking themselves.
Yeah. And I think that's also. It asks questions of examining boards and etc. So complete segue, but in a different environment. So I've just gone through the qualification process to become a personal trainer. And what was really interesting in that process is you have to do way more technical knowledge acquisition than I would bargain for. So nutrition, anatomy, physiology, principles of training. So all of this is actually people should be kind of encouraged by the fact that it was properly difficult to do, because you don't want people actually going out there training people in an unsafe way and not understanding how the body works and nutrition works, etc., which is great. But a big part of actually the getting through the qualification was an observed assessment. So it wasn't just the fact that I had to deliver a training session to a client, in inverted commas, which was assessed in the room, but it was also videoed, and it was assessed by an external examiner who was not just assessing me, but was assessing the assessor. And so that you couldn't fake it, could you? And therefore, if you put that back into our world and say, well, imagine that you then had to sit with a couple and they're going to lay out your thing, and you are being filmed, and this is going to go out to an external. It's not just based on a written case study, but it's based on you
real life interaction.
You had to acquire the information. You maybe had to dig a little bit deeper to understand certain things that they hinted at, because that's the way the exam was structured. You got the information that you needed, and then you were able to build a plan that was relevant to the, not just a case study, but a real life scenario. And anyway, I'm just talking off the top of my head, but that to me is like you've got to. What's the big fear with all this stuff? Is, well, you were cheating, weren't you? You were cheating, and therefore you weren't doing the work. But it also means that you weren't actually acquiring the knowledge, and then you weren't actually acquiring the wisdom that sat behind the knowledge that allowed you to, when you sat down with a couple with a difficult situation, to be able to actually help them with that.
Fascinating stuff. So one of the things you've done, in the last 2 decades, 17 years at Dimensional, is you've seen hundreds and hundreds of firms. And you also do this survey annually that tries to get into the heart of what's going on in financial planning businesses. If you had to sum up what separates the best firms from the rest, what would it be?
Oh, that is a great question. I think there's obviously many aspects of it. There's many facets to firms. But what do the successful firms tend to do is they really focus on simplification. So they think about their clients. So no client in the history of clients has ever come in to an office to meet with a planner and say, would you please make my life more complicated? Okay. Now that's what some planners hear, and what they deliver back is is complex. And as I often say, like a financial plan is simple. Financial planning can be complicated. Now, the point is that the genius of the planner should be is we take in simple, we do the processing of complicated, we give you back simple. That's kind of how it should be. And so the really successful firms, I think, are ones that understand that what is it their clients actually need, and then deliver that, and then just stay very, very consistent. Keep doing the basics well. There's the other thing that I've seen, which is the ability to implement great ideas. And what I mean by that is you've probably lost count of the number of conferences that you've been to, and therefore the number of speakers at conferences that you've seen. And every so often you go, that was a really great idea. Oh, make a note of that. Make a note of that. And what I've observed is the people who get really successful is they not just wrote that idea down, they went back to their office and they either implemented it or they sat down and spoke with their team and said, hey, I've just come across something. We should definitely explore implementing it in the business, and then implement it in the business. And the number of times I would go to visit a firm and you see something and they go, oh yeah, well, we learned this at the Dimensional Conference and this is how we're implementing it. It's like, fantastic. Yeah. That to me, and there's a big differentiator, I think, with firms where they understand how to make a difference. So, and sometimes they're just sort of thinking about how do I sell this to my clients, or this is maybe a different or challenging concept. But oftentimes it's actually not the clients who are the issue. It's kind of the inertia factor within the firm itself. We've always done it this way. So why would we change it? If it ain't broke, why fix it? And I think the successful ones are really open to the idea of let's challenge our assumptions. And if there's a better way to do things, then we have to kind of take people on that journey.
So if you are to give advice to the financial planning community that maybe they wouldn't want to hear, if you have to give a recommendation in terms of what needs to change or what we need to do differently or think differently about, and for sure that we would rather not hear, what would that be?
Oh, that is a really difficult question. So thank you for asking it. I think with the financial planning community, one of the most important things is understanding this simplification aspect. In other words, don't make it complicated for the sake of being complicated, and certainly don't make it complicated because you think that your clients perceive that the added value is your ability to make all of this stuff look more complicated than
Give me an example. Give me.
So
they can blame me. I'm the one pushing you. You're the nice guy in this conversation.
So for example, we did a survey. We went out and interviewed 80 firms last year as part of trying to understand what was actually going on within the UK landscape. So there's lots of different factors. There's a lot of regulation, mergers and acquisition, consolidation activity, stuff around technology and how different technologies are impacting and stuff, and different investment solutions that are coming out. So we were asking a lot of questions, no judgment. We just wanted to understand people's attitudes. At the end of it, we asked a question, which is if you start again with a clean slate, knowing what you know. We had to qualify the question and say, you have to start again. Because a lot of people said, I wouldn't do that. So we say, okay, you have to start again, knowing what you know, with a clean slate. What would you do differently? And essentially everybody was saying, I just make it so simple. I would just have one investment solution, just use one platform, just do really, really simple, take out the frictions. We did kind of point out to them that, well, you could do that right now. You could use a dimensional world allocation fund, one fund, simple, and you could implement that now. And there would be that sort of, but if I did that, would people actually
It's too
think I was
simple.
adding?
It's too-
Would people think that I was adding value? And then you
Yeah.
look at some firms that we work with who that's exactly what they do. They put all the emphasis on actually working with the clients, understanding their needs, creating the plan, holding them accountable to actually implementing the plan and living the great life that was set out in the plan. And the investment solution was kind of the engine.
Yeah.
So if you could imagine, I mean, this you always used to sort of surprise me back in the day, where you'd have people who were building portfolio, maybe not a 30 stock portfolio, a 30 fund portfolio, and they were bolting together. Top performers. It's like the fact that they never explored the overlap. So you've got 5 UK equity firms, and
They're all doing the same thing.
So they were kind of putting these portfolios together, and they thought that was the value add.
Yeah. Yeah.
And actually, what we've observed is, okay, so you put all these funds together, and then you came back the next year and apologized that some of them didn't work out the way that you thought they would, and then you'd sort of change it again and change it again. And I thought, well, let's say you bought a car, and every year you go back to the garage and they say, oh yeah, we've got to change the engine. I mean, like, in what world does that make any kind of sense? You sold me this car, and the engine was supposed to be for life. I mean, needed servicing, but that was the engine you put in the car. And I was thinking, well, hang on a minute. If you apply the same to the financial plan, we built your financial plan and we implemented a portfolio that, aside from a bit of servicing, making sure that everything was working, that was the portfolio for life. That would have been the expectation. So the fact that you were changing all this stuff around to maybe look busy, heaven forfend that you were doing it because you were just churning over the.
I mean, like that is still very much around. Where we overcomplicate these things. And there was this guy at the CISI conference who runs a firm in Canada and has 5 billion of AUM, and they use one fund, a client portfolio. Yeah. And it's like, when you simplify, you really get the ability to focus on other areas and service the clients.
Yeah, we worked with a client in the US, and he was a one-person firm. He outsourced everything. He used Dimensional, one solution, and he just was the master of minimalism. He just created the simplest possible way, and he managed well over 1 billion in assets.
Incredible.
And his whole point was, you make it easy for clients.
So let's talk about Dimensional itself. The firm's been a bedrock for the evidence-based investing globally. How would you describe Dimensional today? What's changed? What's remained the same?
So I think we have stayed absolutely true to the founding principles of the firm and the application of academic work in a practical sense. So I think one of the things that I've really noticed at the firm is that the philosophical underpinning of what we do, that the information in prices that we can use to identify securities with higher expected return. Like, we don't have internal debates at Dimensional about does that make sense or not? Because it's been the evidence behind it, the academic work that has been done, that sets us on such a good path that really it's becoming around. It's like that was go back to 1981 and the start of the firm and David Booth and Rex Singfield and the work that they did with the Eugene Farmer and Merton Miller and the academics that they worked with in the faculty at the University of Chicago. Like, you could trace what we're doing today all the way back to there. I mean, it's absolutely consistent. But what we've done is we've refined, further and further how we solve the problems of implementation and removing fictions, through every part of the process. whether it's applying the research into how you design portfolios, when you go into interacting with markets and the way that you trade in markets, and just understanding more about how to implement these ideas so much more efficiently. And I think the great thing when you work at a firm, when you're surrounded by really, really smart people a lot of the time, is just the when you kind of bring all of those minds together. So there's kind of the beauty of having a firm, or you have people who come together collectively to solve problems and think about how we can create solutions for our clients out there in the world. And there's kind of an excitement and an energy that surrounds all that, because it's just such a sort of a creative environment to be in when you've got some of the smartest people on the planet, but it's certainly on the planet in the world of finance. Working in that way. So I have the most enormous respect for David Booth and Rex and the people who founded Dimensional based on those ideas, and have really consistently sort of just constantly wanted to push the boundaries of how we apply that in the real world. And I know some of the people on this listening to this podcast may have had the opportunity to watch the film Tune Out the Noise, which is essentially the story of all those people coming together to really solve these problems in finance and think about the research and how you'd use it. But if you haven't seen the film, it's now on YouTube. Get yourself the popcorn in, curl up on the sofa and spend an hour and a half in the company of some of the people who just revolutionized our entire world. I'd highly recommend it.
Incredible stuff. So, whose idea or work would you say have most influenced your thinking in over the years?
I will talk to two people who probably changed the course of my life in the sense of how did I come to these ideas? So, I mean, it was very early 2000s, so I think Dimensional had probably just touched ground in the UK. And a friend of mine recommended a book called Index Funds by Mark Hebner.
Yes,
of IFA.com. And so it was pre-Amazon. So I had to send off for the book. And I remember this huge package arriving from the US, which was a bit of a novelty back then. And my wife said, is that book? Don't start reading that book now. So let's have dinner first. So we had dinner, and then about 4:00 in the morning, she came downstairs and said, "Are you ever coming to bed?" Because basically, I'd read the book in the course of one night, and that one night changed my life, because all the frustrations that I'd had about what it meant to be managing money on behalf of people you cared about, and how often we were let down by different fund managers or different ideas, and that was all articulated in that book. And I've had the opportunity to meet Mark on several occasions. He's a lovely person.
He's a super communicator, isn't he?
Just
brilliant, incredible.
Yeah. And so Mark, thank you, because you literally did change the course of my life. Another guy was Jeff Troutner, again very early adopter of Dimensional, and Jeff built his business on a monthly newsletter that he would write. And that was very influential. So as I'd made this transition and say, well, this is the way forward. This is what I will do with my clients going forward. And, having the opportunity to kind of tap into what these practitioners were doing in the US, and they were pioneers at the time that they were doing it, and they were some, decade or so ahead of where I was in my life, but knowing that there was a well-trodden path. And so that, I think, between the Mark Hebner's book and Jeff Troutner's newsletter, it was kind of that really set me on the path. And then subsequently coming to the Dimensional Conference, and then the opportunity to obviously meet and spend time with some of the people in the firm that have they're just incredible, like people like Robert Merton or Ken French, and obviously they think deeply about all this stuff. But their genius is that they can take the complex and actually communicate it in a simple way that even people like me could understand. And I just think they made these ideas so accessible.
Yeah, so simple. I remember. Sorry but like I remember walking into interdimensional. 15 years ago, something like that, and meeting David Swanwick and like his incredible communication skill. But what amazed me ultimately was then a couple of years back, it was in the last 10 years, when Ken French, when you brought him to London at this conference. And this guy, I'm thinking, this Nobel Prize winner is a couple of steps away from me and teaching and just dissecting the principle of investing. I mean, that's what Dimensional did, where other people will put fund managers in front of advisors. You put Nobel Prize winners in front of advisors. Just incredible people.
Yeah, and what I've found, and so the firm creates, and actually just, it's not Ken who won the Nobel Prize, it's Eugene Farmer.
Sorry, it's Eugene. My bad. Yeah,
sorry, no disrespect to Ken, but he is obviously long-term collaborator with Eugene Farmer. I think one of the things that they've contributed, not just to obviously the academic literature, but by being part of the firm, by being on the board, is really holding Dimensional to account in terms of, the thing that you learn from academics, and certainly that I learned when I attempted to do a PhD in finance, and is that there's a really a sort of a different standard that you get held to. You get held to account, and it may well be the case that certain asset managers, they say things that the marketing department would think is a cool thing to say. But at Dimensional, it's like, no, we don't say things because the marketing department think it's a cool thing to say. We say things that are very consistent with the academic evidence that we rely on, and so they hold us to account in the firm, and we have training in the firm. We've had this in place for a good number of years, where we go through the principles of dimensional investing, and everybody in the firm goes through this training process where they really learn at a deep level the background to why we manage money in the way that we do, but then they learn how to communicate that effectively to advisors, and so that they can communicate it to their clients. And again, we put a big premium on the ability to communicate complex ideas in a simple way that clients will understand.
So the word on the street is, you are. What's the word? You're sailing off to the sunset.
Yeah, I'd hate to use the R word because retire. We don't do that. We're thinking of other things to do.
So, looking back, the last 10 years, longer if you like, what would you like people to say you stood for?
What I stood for, I believe, was integrity, and sort of at all levels, whether it's in your dealings with other people or just the intellectual credibility. And I think the beauty of having worked at Dimensional is that you, like everything that we do because it's just so well researched and thought through. So if we do it at Dimensional, it's because there's an incredible amount of evidence that we've gone through to say, yeah, this is the right thing to do. Similarly, if we don't do something, it's because there's an equal amount of research that's gone into saying why this probably wouldn't be a good idea. So it makes it quite straightforward to actually go out in the world and represent the firm and the ideas that sit behind the firm, because you can have just a huge amount of confidence in that. I think for me, in terms of personally, I have had the opportunity to go out and speak at conferences and also write articles for the website that have essentially been all, in many ways, it's just telling one story and using different examples. But the one story is the value of financial advice, the value of financial planning, the value of having a great financial planner in your corner, a trusted advisor, and I think that's really, if I think about the different things that I've done. For example, the one thing that has surprised me in terms of the impact that it had, and the one that if I meet people at conferences for the first time, that they'll say, "Oh, I really appreciated that you did it." Something called the back of a napkin financial plan.
Yeah,
and is this idea that I had. It was during COVID, and somebody had asked, we're going to do this webcast for a client. We're looking for ideas. And I said, I'll do something called the back of a napkin financial plan. He said, well, what's that? I said, I don't know. I haven't written it yet, but I kind of had this idea. And it was really based on Dan Wheeler, who started the advisor business for Dimensional. He always used to say, hey, if I go out for a client meeting, all I just need is a yellow legal pad and a matrix book, the big book of data. And he would just use these very simple ideas and he would get the data from the matrix book. And so I wanted to do something that sort of reflected that idea of how do you just sit down with people, very simple sketches. When I was an advisor, I used to do group personal pension schemes with big companies. And so I'd go out and do these pension clinic days, and I'd have, say, 10, 15 people come in for a meeting, and you'd have this sort of opportunity to give them these simple ideas around, saving for retirement. And I'd always be scribbling little diagrams, and they would say to me, or can I keep that? Because there was something that resonated with them in the way that you sketched out some of the ideas. So I thought, well, I'll just take that and I'll build something around those ideas of how do you take a concept and then kind of bring it in such a way that people would go,
that is it for me, bringing ideas into, communicating these ideas in a way that I could understand, that other people could understand, and in a way that enabled you to push the frontier. I can never forget, I was standing in a presentation you made about mind mapping. I'm thinking, this was years ago, it was meant to be a conference for financial advisor. And you were on the stage talking about mind mapping and scribbling ideas, communicating ideas, passing this to clients. So I am grateful for that, and our subsequent interaction. It's been really, really impactful. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Abraham. Yeah.
So I guess 2 more questions for you before I wrap this up, which is one, what have you found most challenging, surprising about your own planning and preparation process for sailing to the sunset, since we're not using the R word?
Okay. So most challenging, I think, it's all very well to, when you're talking about financial planning for other people.
Yeah.
But when it actually comes down to thinking about, the financial planning for yourself and your partner and the family and all of that, and you're crossing that doorway, aren't you? There's that point in your life, I call it like the last day moment, which is, you reach a point where all of that accumulated human capital, that's reached that point. And then you have the last day and you hand over your badge, and then what? And for me, it was, these 3 things is like, hopefully you're going to have your health.
Yeah.
A sense of purpose, that there's something meaningful to you. For me, it's so important that you're more excited about the door that opens than the one that's closing. And the last thing you ever want to be worried about is the money side of it. So you want to know, like most retirees, or the one big question is, am I going to be okay? Are we going to be okay? And the confidence that you get, so from working with a great financial planner, when they say, yeah, we've modeled it every which way, got the timeline app here, we've got, like, we can't break your financial plan, okay? In all of the, recorded history that we have and all the parameters we put in, we can't break the plan. So guess what? You're going to be fine. So I think the challenging bit was just thinking about, you make that transition. I've been very fortunate to work at Dimensional, and obviously I've enjoyed the financial rewards of working for Dimensional. But the idea that you would turn that tap off and replace it with the accumulated investing that you've done over those years, and that is a moment when you go, yeah, okay, let's do that. So probably the most challenging thing, to finally answer your question in a brief way, is coming to that moment of deciding to turn off that switch and turn on another switch.
It's incredible stuff. So what's the new purpose? What's going to get you out of bed going forward?
So as I alluded to a little bit earlier, then talking about personal training, it's something that as I've been involved in the sport of rowing since I was 10 years old, so I guess that's 56 years. But I've always been fascinated by human performance and human potential, not just in the physical realm, in the sporting, how do you physically optimize in the use of your mind. So I trained with Tony Buzan to do mind mapping and memory skills and speed reading. And I mean, he was an incredible person. And so to learn about how do you optimize your thinking, and so okay, how can I apply that? I've learned a lot that I think can be valuable to people. So one way I represent that is by helping people with their training. Another way, which I used to do before I joined Dimensional, which I was a coach. I was coaching advisors. I think I've probably learned quite a lot over the last 17 years that might make that even more valuable. So, those opportunities to help people, where the thing with coaching is you can't give people the desire. You can't give them the ambition. They have to have that within them. But if they have it within them, then you kind of bring all of these different resources and perspective to bear to help them achieve what they want to achieve. And that to me is, it's so exciting because there's nothing better than actually watching people that you coach achieve stuff. So I've been a competitive rower for a long time, and I love winning. Okay, but I get as much, if not more, pleasure out of watching my crews winning, because you've helped them achieve something that they couldn't necessarily have achieved on their own. And I think the same is true of business. And there's a story I could tell you. It'll take too long for the podcast, but a particular person who was working in a larger organization and was failing, and the number of things that we did to help him. So let's say there were 26 people working in this, 26 advisors in this particular business, and he was number 26.
Okay.
And I'd love to tell you that as a result of all the work that we did together, he got to be number one.
Wow.
Which he didn't. He got to be number 3.
That's good. That's good.
So he was on the podium. But the point was, it's kind of when you get involved with that kind of thing, it's understanding what is motivating people, but also what they're doing to self-sabotage. Why are they not being as successful as they want to be? And what's standing in their way. And I think great thing with coaching is it's not only that you're doing all the sort of encouragement, it's like you're also kind of understanding where the blocks are and then bringing the strategies and the tools to bear to help say, right, okay, this is how we can help you move forward with these things. It's been super exciting, honestly. I've been in the workplace 42 years. I've been at Dimensional 17. I was an advisor for 17 years before that. And I have to say, it has been the most incredible ride.
Yeah.
Things have changed. So when I started in the workplace, we didn't have desktop computing. I had a page per day diary, a telephone, and a card index box. And so things have really come a long way since then, and I think it's just, I'm more excited by the future than I can possibly tell you. So I think it's going to be a great time. You'll have heard this many times. There's never been a better time to be an advisor, but honestly, there's never been a better time to be an advisor.
That's incredible. I couldn't agree more. And so, we're gonna see you. We're gonna see you around. It's not, as you said, it's not goodbye. It's au revoir.
Au revoir.
It's
exactly right.
David, I really sincerely mean this, from the bottom of my heart. And I dare say on behalf of hundreds and hundreds of financial planners, that you've met and touched. You've made a difference to me. I'm sure to many, 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 many others. Thank you. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your contribution. Thank you for your passion, for not just evidence-based investing, but financial planning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abraham.
That's a wrap on today's show. Massive, massive thanks to my production crew, especially Jake Osha, Melissa Canham, and the entire team. And of course, to our sponsor, Timeline, the market-leading provider of integrated planning technology and model portfolio service to advisors. I do hope you've enjoyed today's show. Head over to Apple Podcast and give us your review there. Until next time, goodbye.